All right, we have a pretty good turnout today, and so as always, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself at any point. I am running the slides, so Dana will manage the chat, and uh, and then I will let Dana introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you, Nate. So I walked outside today after work and I felt like we should be playing softball because the wind was blowing about 230 miles per hour. So I was like, it's got to be close to spring sports season. So it's appropriate that we're having a softball webinar tonight. I'm looking forward to this presentation this evening. Many of you in the state already know our presenter. His name is Gary Glendo, and he is our Southwest Region softball assigner. But Gary's been around for quite a few years and has worked a number of sports for us. He's been a volleyball official and a softball umpire, and I believe you did basketball at one time, Gary. Am I remembering that right?
Or we can even date farther back, Dana. I did football at one time.
Did you? That was pre me. Goodness gracious.
Yes.
So he's a man of many talents, is Mr. Glendo. So without further ado, I will actually turn it over to Gary, and he'll be talking tonight about the infield fly rule. And as Nate said, go ahead and throw any comments in the chat or questions in the chat. Just make sure your questions are relevant to what Gary's talking about. And then if we've got additional questions that aren't related to the topic, we can get those at the end. So Gary, thanks for doing this, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Dana. And right from the very beginning, I want to be sure that that I thank Nate for all the help that he's been in putting this together. We talked about doing this webinar about a month ago, and I can promise you I do not have the computer skills enough to do this on my own, and I am grateful to Nate for how much help he's given to me for this. So thanks a lot, Nate. I appreciate it.
Hey, anytime.
Basically, we're going to talk a little bit about an infield fly rule, and I know that there are some minor differences whenever you talk from different association to association, but one of the things that I feel is pretty important is that we learn what ours is in the National Federation of High School Softball. So that's what we're going to be specific to tonight. And we're going to cover it the way that it's written in our rule book, and we're going to go from there. Now, feel free at any time if you have any questions, of course, on the chat line with Dana. But if you've got some questions, let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Let's get it taken care of. I think one of the positives that has come from this whole COVID deal, although there's far and few between, that the opportunity for us to talk together as an entire state and be sure that we're all on the same page is only going to make us better umpires overall. So we're not going to have, or we'll have limited number of times when they come back and say, well, Tuesday night they said it different. So we're all going to be on the same page from now on. So let's get into this. Nate, you want to go to our rule, infield fly rule. This is straight out of the rule book, Rule 2-30 infield fly rule. The infield fly rule is declared by the umpire, and I want to overemphasize declared, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. A fair fly, not including a line drive or an attempted bunt, that can be caught by an infielder with ordinary effort, and we're going to talk about that too, when the runners are on first and second, or all three bases are occupied and before there's 2 outs in the inning. That is the real gist of the rule. The other rest of this part is some definitions, so let's go over that. Any defensive player positioned in the infield at the time of the pitch shall be considered an infielder for the purposes of the rule. The rule does not preclude outfielders from being permitted to make the catch. The ball is live, the batter is out, which removes the force, but runners may advance at their own risk. The runners may tag up and advance as soon as the batted ball is touched by an infielder, or by a fielder, excuse me. And if declared infield fly becomes foul, it is treated as a foul ball, not an infield fly. I think one of the things that creates some confusion is not so much to the umpire standpoint, but from the layperson standpoint, is because the batter runner is automatically called out, they assume that this rule is a negative to the offensive team. And in reality, this rule is in place to protect the offensive team. When that batter runner is called out, there's no longer a force play, and the runners who are on base in force play situations, either first base, second base, or first, second, and third, are not forced to run. Now, they may run, as it is said in there, they may run, but they're at liberty to be put out, and they're running at their own risk. And so I think that that's pretty important, because almost always, and Dana brought up the wind, and that's a great example for our area, is that we get an infield fly that goes up and the wind blows it all over the place and the ball drops. It's still an out, and the batter runner is still out, but the runners are no longer forced to run. And invariably, the runners take off. Now, because it's a ball that hits the ground or gets dropped, all they have to do is wait till the ball is contacted by the fielder or contacts the run, and they may run. But it's not a force play, and they've got to be tagged out by whomever and wherever the play is being made. So I think that those are some things that are really important. A lot of times you're going to, a lot of times you're going to see the offensive coach start coming out and complaining about the fact that somebody's been called out and runners took off and this runner got thrown out and that runner did whatever they did. It's all because of a misunderstanding of what this rule is. Again, this rule is in there to protect the offensive team, not to protect the defense, and it's to stay away from any double and or potential triple plays if it occurs. So we'll go from there. You want to go to the next screen, Nate?
I sure will. Oh, I'm losing it. All right, there it is.
Okay, so this is scenario one. Out of the rule, we have runners at first and second base before there are two outs in the inning. We have to remember that, because if there's two outs, nobody has to tag up and nobody's forced to run. So over on the right-hand side, we have it as the top of the third inning with 1 ball and 2 strikes and only 1 out on the batter. As you can see, we have a batter and 2 runners on base. Our home plate umpire, of course, is in their position, and the R1 umpire is in their position. Again, we have signals that we want to make sure that we pre-pitch signals that we want to give to each other as umpire to umpire signals. That being in softball, that being, that's correct. U1 is in the wrong position with runners at first and second. How come that happened, Nate?
Because I'm a basketball guy and I put that person there.
I thought in scenario one, that's okay. But you're correct. In this scenario, there should, that R1 should be behind the shortstop in the C position. And I'm not sure, but maybe the next slide is going to be incorrect also, because we got them in the wrong place on both slides, but that's all right.
Yep.
There you go.
Well, that's in the bases.
That's a bases loaded situation.
Yep. That was my mistake. I think I might have moved it.
Okay. But the comment was correct. The U1, the base umpire should be behind the shortstop. The signal to each other is a open hand across the chest that should be initiated by the home plate umpire to the base umpires, but that's not mandatory. It can be from either way, and it should be reciprocated back and forth to each other. It's important that it gets done before the pitch is thrown, so that in the case that, thank you, Nate, in the case that a ball is hit as an infield fly to an infielder, we are prepared for the scenario that may come up in the calls that we may have to make. Anybody have any questions or any problems now that Nate has got us corrected? We okay now? Good. Okay. So now if a infield fly, a ball is hit, and Nate just showed our little pop-up going from the batter to the shortstop area. So the first thing that would occur is that we now have an actual action play. And that action play, the action signal is that as umpires, we are going to point into the air with an extended arm straight up. And the base umpire is going to allow time for the home plate umpire to make the call. True, Stan, very true. So we're going to point to the air, generally in the direction of the ball, so that it may assist our home plate umpire who may be having trouble finding the actual location of the ball, but pointing to the air, signifying that we do have a potential infield fly. Again, the plate umpire has the primary responsibility for calling the infield fly, loud enough for the infielders to hear it, and declaring that the batter is out. Infield fly, batter is out. If by chance the home plate umpire, once the ball has reached its highest point, has not made this call, it is permissible for the base umpire who's behind the shortstop to go ahead and make that call. Again, loud enough for infielders to hear it, and preferably loud enough for base runners to hear it so that they realize they are not at liability to run and be put out if they do run. So are we okay at this point? Sure. This is just an infield fly. We're showing this as going to the shortstop, but it could be to any infield player at this point. Again, one of the specifications in the rule states that this is not a line drive. So we do have an arc on the ball, and it's not on a bunt attempt. So if we have a bunt attempt, we do not have an infield fly rule. If we have a line drive, we do not have an infield fly rule. This does have to have some arc, and it must be caught by an infielder with ordinary effort. There is some discussion in our umpire's manual, I believe it is, that gives a brief description on what ordinary effort is. And they state it as being when an infielder faces the infield to make the catch on the ball. In other words, their back isn't to the infield running away from the play and makes the catch. They have to be in a position where they're facing the infield. They deem that as being ordinary effort. Now, again, we're the ones who get paid for our judgment. So saying that they had to have squared up shoulders to home plate, that may not be exactly true. They could be facing the third baseman. They got set up just based on the location of the fly ball. They didn't get all the way turned around. That could still be ordinary effort. That's the judgment part of this call. Okay. The factual part of this call is we have to have runners at least on first and second, and it has to be a ball that's in the infield. I think at this point, it's important to note that the dirt infield has nothing to do with the fact that it's an infield fly. An infield fly could be in the grass area. It's possible. And I think, well, let's go through scenario. The one you're at now, Nate, is fine. We have the same scenario, only we have runners at all three bases. Again, it's a force play. We are protecting the offensive team from being doubled up because as a force play, they have to, or because of a pop fly, they have to stay close to the base to tag up, and they would then be in jeopardy of being forced out at the next base if we didn't declare the home plate or the batter base runner out immediately on the infield fly. So again, this pop-up could be behind second base, and the shortstop's going to move over and catch the fly ball there. Again, that would justify an infield fly and an infield fly rule. So the shortstop sprints to catch the ball behind third base because she can't see it or lost it. Is that ordinary effort? Your judgment. Do you deem that as being ordinary effort in that particular play? There was a play. I just watched a college game not too long ago. The bases were loaded. They hit a pop fly. Windy day, Dana, just for you. Windy day. They hit a pop up behind the third baseman, just about where the U1 umpire is stationed right now. The shortstop moved in that direction to go field it, lost the ball, and the ball dropped. And all the runners took off. The runner from third scored, rightfully so, no problem with that. The runner from second took off for third. The shortstop picked the ball up, threw the ball to the third baseman, and the third baseman caught the ball on the bag as a force out. She was not out because the batter base runner was automatically out, but the runner left the field and went into the third base dugout. And now we had all kinds of problems because neither one of the umpires had called an infield fly rule on it. So it created all kinds of problems on this. And from my observation point, I think they did it all wrong. They scored the run. They called the batter out for going to first base, and they let the runner come back to third base. When she left and went into the dugout area, in my judgment, she gave herself up. She's out. So again, we're talking about balls that are behind infielders. There's also kind of a dead man's area that's on short little pop-ups that fall right in between second base and the pitcher's mound that could potentially have the same effect as what we're talking about, having to sprint in that area to catch the ball. That's a play-by-play situation, and you're getting paid money to use your judgment. You have to determine whether that's ordinary effort or not. That can't be for us to say on a webinar that, yep, that's going to be ordinary effort. We can't say that. That's a play-by-play situation there. Anybody else have any questions about this so far? Let's move to the next screen because now we're going to complicate things. In this particular scenario, scenario 3, we're going to have a pop-up.
And this was incorrect as well.
That's right.
Let's make it right. Will that work?
Yep. This is a particular pop-up that gets hit behind the second baseman.
I don't know.
But
the umpires, the base umpires.
Oh, that's okay. Behind second base, the second baseman. Behind second base, the second baseman goes back to field the ball. The right fielder also comes in to field the ball. And now it's, again, it's potentially an infield fly. Did the second baseman use ordinary effort to get to their position? Did they square up and make it with ordinary effort? Or did the right fielder have to come in and make the catch? Even if you felt like the second baseman got there with ordinary effort, but yet the right fielder stepped in and caught it, it could still be deemed as an infield fly. Remember, again, we're protecting the offensive team. So if they let that ball drop or whatever, the right fielder could pick it up, throw it to second base, or throw it to third base, get a force out there, throw it to second base, get a second force out there. And now we have a double play, which is what we're trying to protect from occurring against the offensive team. But it's all determined by the effort of the second baseman. If that second baseman is simply sprinting back, trying to make an over-the-shoulder catch, I wouldn't consider that ordinary effort. And in that case, I wouldn't consider this an infield fly. But it's possible. Again, what we get paid the big bucks for. Anybody have any additional questions about this particular play? Again, this ball is landing out in the grass, but depending on the depth of the infielder when she started, that could be pretty easy effort to get to where she's at right there.
Gary, I want to ask for a clarification here, if I may.
Sure.
My understanding is that you make the call based on whether the average fielder should be able to make that play with reasonable effort. And it really doesn't matter whether, in fact, you see reasonable effort or extraordinary effort on the field. Is that right?
Well, again, I refer back to what our rule actually says. And our rule says with ordinary effort. It doesn't say anything about an average infielder or above average infielder. It says ordinary effort. Again, you could take a second baseman who's a D1 potential star, and they could go 20 or 30 feet back there, with ordinary effort and make that play. You could take a girl on a JV team and the ball essentially lands in the same place and she has no idea where it's even at. Does that make one an infield fly and the other one not? I would say yes, although it landed in the same spot. So who's an average player and who isn't an average player? I think, again, now we're starting to put in our own opinions as to what somebody is rather than following the rule as it's written. You do have to have some guidelines, and if those are the guidelines that you're using to determine whether it's ordinary effort or not, I'm certainly not going to question you about that. As far as being your partner, we may have some questions about that coming from the coaches, but again, our answer to them is, in my judgment, she could have caught that with ordinary effort. And because she didn't, doesn't change the fact that the rule is still in place.
Well, yeah, that's my point. I agree with you that it doesn't matter what actually happens, only what should have been possible.
That's correct. I
Yes.
agree with that 100%. Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Nate, you want to go to the next one where we kind of flip things around to the other side of the field?
Yep. So let me let me fix this one too. Man, I'm sorry, Gary.
I thought we had all this right. Did you?
Yeah, I don't know what I did. Shane, is that good? Is that better?
Well, and again, I think initially we want to try to line up on that particular side of the shortstop, but it's also going to be determined on where that shortstop chooses to set up and play.
Okay.
If that shortstop moves all the way up the middle, moving to their left shoulder might not be the best place to be. Of course, if they move all the way over into the hole between third and short, then being on the right side is going to be pretty easy effort. So we do have to use, again, some of our judgment on where the best place to be is. It's just not automatic that we automatically go to that shoulder every time. But we need to be where we can avoid being a hindrance to the infielders. With
Hey,
rule
Gary.
of thumb stating the shoulders.
There was a question.
Yeah, hey, Gary, you know how most high school defensive players are right on the cut of the grass as
Yeah.
their starting position. On that previous one, wouldn't you just say if the second baseman backs up? That could be an
Sure.
infield fly because they're on the dirt to start with.
Pretty much so. You're right, Stan. I would agree with that. Again, you may have a potential infielder who has been taught well and schooled well and has the ability that they get a pop up, they're going to turn and sprint back 15, 20 feet and then turn around, square up to the ball and catch it on the way forward, which again, for that person, that's ordinary effort for them. Then you also can take somebody. I had a girl who just watched it the other day, a pop up that was on the dirt. And I think it was a carnival that she was the clown in, running around in circles because she had no idea where she was at. So it's, again, I think some of those situations that borderline, but I think the really important part to emphasize this and to keep us all out of trouble is not to use the dirt as the determining factor on whether it's an infield fly or not. That's not the determining factor. And the coaches, I promise you, the majority of the coaches are going to tell you, but it landed in the grass. That has nothing to do with it. It's an infield fly that was caught with ordinary effort. And as Stan just brought up, if your starting position is on the edge of the grass, taking one step back, you're in the grass, and that's ordinary effort. The coach's definition wants that to be a ball to the outfield. That's not true. Thank you, Stan. Okay, so you want to proceed with this one, Nate?
Yep.
So in this particular play, when Nate and I put this particular slide together, we talked about how, especially in softball, not so much in baseball nor in slow pitch, but if we had a slapper at bat and we have a batter in the left-handed batter's box, that our left fielders have a tendency of playing quite shallow. So that left fielder could easily come in almost to the dirt and still make the play on a pop fly that's hit over there by a slapper or by a left-handed hitter. That's not unusual in our game. So again, we have to determine, even though this left fielder caught the ball relatively close to the infield, depending on where the shortstop actually lined up, that may not be ordinary effort for the shortstop. If that shortstop is playing in tight, where that left fielder is catching this ball, that's not ordinary effort. That would be extreme effort for her to get there, thus making this a ball hit to the outfield and not an infield fly rule. So again, this is the biggest part as far as our judgment is concerned as to whether it is an infield fly rule or not. The other parts are pretty factual. Where the runners have to be, the number of outs, all of those things, those are factual. That's easy. The judgment part comes into determining whether a ball is hit deep enough, whether they're using ordinary effort, whether it's, and again, because we have the slappers, was it a bunt or was it a slap or was it a swing through? Again, that's where our judgment comes into play. And we have to be able, when we get into the discussion with the coaches and explaining to them why we've determined that to be an infield fly or not an infield fly, we've got to use the correct terminology and letting them know so that we don't make this a difficult situation for the next group of umpires that come in. So we go from there. Okay, Nate. So as we just stated, the infield fly rule does not preclude the outfielders from being permitted to make the catch. Both in the last two scenarios, we talked about a ball that was possibly caught by an outfielder. In one case, it could have been either an infield fly or not. In the second case, even though the left fielder might have been closer, it probably was not an infield fly because of where the shortstop would have been playing with a slapper at bat. So we've got to take those things into consideration prior to the pitch being thrown. Where is our shortstop being lined up? Where is our second baseman being lined up? Could they get to a ball that's hit there, hit wherever it's hit with ordinary effort? So we've got to determine that. And again, then we make the call both visually and vocally.
So there's a comment that says the book does say that the outfielder must be positioned in the infield.
What that's the way that I read and understand that, Cherry, is that you can have, and there's many times that's, especially with slappers that are coming up to bat now, that they'll use, the defensive team will use a shift and they will move one of the outfielders to play in the infield. Yes. And that infielder is then in an infield position, although they still are considered by rule and by position as an outfielder. So even though that infielder is in the infield, they could catch the ball and it's still an infield fly. Again,
right. What I was getting at, Gary, is that they must be positioned in the infield at the start of the pitch. So right. if they're in the outfield and they run in, they're not considered to have started in the infield.
That's correct. But it also, the rule also states that it does not preclude, an infield fly does not preclude that the outfielder doesn't catch the ball. It could still be an infield fly, but you are correct, 100%. You're correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen it very often in our state, but there are some, especially when you start getting into some of the travel tournaments and stuff, that they do use the shift, and they bring what they typically do, because the slapper is going to hit the ball to the opposite field, left field and center field. They bring the right fielder in and position them basically as a fifth infielder right in the middle of the infield. I have not seen that in several years, but I have seen it in the past. So it is a possibility. And again, that doesn't change the definition of the infield fly. That outfielder playing the infield doesn't change the rule. It's still the same. Okay, Nate, let's move on to our next one. Okay, so here's the important part. When the infield fly, when the ball is hit, the ball is live. The batter is out, and that removes the force. Therefore, the runners may advance at their own risk. They are not forced to run. They run at their own risk. On the defensive side, there are no force plays. On an infield fly, there are no force plays. If any runner is to be put out, they have to be tagged out. So a play has to be made on them. They have to be touched with the ball prior to being safely on any base. So it's a live ball. The batter is out. Therefore, there's no force. And the runners may advance at their own risk. And the only way the runners can be put out is to be tagged out. They cannot be forced out. Anybody have any questions about that? And again, this is Sherry, this is what we were talking about. Go ahead, Nate. You're all right.
Okay. Where was I? Sorry. One more. Oh. Is that it?
One more.
That one?
Okay, that's the next one. Yes.
All right.
If declared an infield fly and it becomes foul, and again, with our windy weather, this is, I was at a practice game the other day and saw a ball that it was hit up into the infield, and the first person that called it was a shortstop. And when the ball landed, it was between the first base and the first base dugout. So the wind can definitely have an effect on this. But an infield fly becomes a foul. It is treated as a foul ball, and it's no longer an infield fly. So the one thing that we do, especially if there's the possibility of it becoming a foul ball, is we want to declare loudly, verbally, that it is an infield fly if fair. Okay, infield fly if fair. And once it becomes foul, we then immediately call it a foul ball. We don't, that's not the end of our responsibilities because it becomes foul. We need to call it foul and clarify to everybody. We know what we're doing. No, it's not an infield fly. It is a foul ball because it was in foul territory. Sometimes that's a little bit tough because it's right down the line. But again, that's the reason for the responsibility being the home plate umpire's call, because they can look down both of those lines and determine whether that ball was touched in fair territory or foul territory. Everybody comfortable with that? Infield fly if fair. Okay.
No. That's it for the slides.
All right. So does anybody have any particular scenario that they've run across with an infield fly that we want to try to discuss here? A couple of them have come up that we've briefly touched. The one little short fly ball that's over the third baseman's head, fly balls between the outfielders, that was discussed. The other one that I've seen happen occasionally, that's happened occasionally is if our shortstop and second baseman are playing back along the grass, as Stan had mentioned earlier, we hit a soft little looping pop-up that ends up right in the middle of the diamond behind the pitcher, but in front of second base. That is extremely difficult for people to get to as far as ordinary effort. Again, I think we have to use our judgment and determine that could or could not be an infield fly, depending on your judgment and ordinary effort of the players at that particular game. So again, there are some judgment aspects that we have to look at for this rule and be aware of. And I think, again, as far as our explanations to the coaches, using the proper terminology to explain the reason you made your call is the best way for us to stay out of trouble. Because as soon as we start using made up terminology that comes from the Sandlot game or whatever, all we've done is get ourselves in trouble. So let's make ourselves familiar with the terminology of the rule, and let's use that terminology when we do have to give the coach an explanation, which probably is going to be quite often because most coaches don't understand the infield fly rule either.
Gary, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Did you say in the beginning that a bunt can never be an infield fly rule?
According to rule, that's correct.
So even if it goes 8 or 9 feet in the air,
That's correct. If it is a bunt, if the batter has squared around to bunt and it potentially gets thrown hard enough that it comes off that bat and goes 8 or 9 feet in the air, that's a bunt attempt and we cannot have an infield fly.
I did not know that.
Right. Again, by definition, by our rule definition, that's what it says.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Hey,
welcome.
Gary, I had a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Going back to the infield, the outfield players have to be positioned in the infield.
Can be.
I do not read that in that rule. I just see that there's a definition in there. It just says that any defensive player positioned in the infield at the time is considered an infielder.
Right.
But I don't see where it says in there that that the outfielders have to be in the infield in order for there to be.
Now, Rick, I think this is a great point. And again, I'm sorry, but I had to leave Las Cruces. I actually am in Carlsbad right now, and I took off without my book, so I don't have them in front of me to be able to read what it says. But I think this is a really good point where we go back to definitions that are used from different organizations, where that may be a statement that is true in some other organization, but it's not true in the Federation.
Yeah, I'll just read it real quickly. It just says any defensive player positioned in the infield at the time of the pitch shall be considered an infielder for the purposes of this rule. But it does not say that they must be in the infield. It just says that if they're there, they're considered as an infielder. And then it goes on to say the rule does not preclude outfielders from being permitted to make the catch.
And that's where I feel it's important as far as again, distinguishing that it does not have to be caught by an infielder for it to be an infield fly. It could be caught by an outfielder, whether they started from the outfield position or whether they moved in on a shift and they were in the infield.
That's correct. Yes,
It's still the same.
I agree with
I
that.
agree with you. Thank you for clarifying that, Rick. Do you correct the failure? I missed that. I didn't get to read.
No, I have it right here. Where did it go? Oh,
I think I know where this one is going.
Like
But
829.
So it says, do you correct a failure on umpires to declare an infield fly rule when an actual infield fly rule was in effect?
Yes.
100% yes. And I think, again, that was something that happened in that particular scenario that I brought up at the college game with the bases loaded or whatever. Nobody, first of all, they didn't signal to each other. Second of all, when the pop-up did occur, nobody signaled that one. Nobody verbally called it, but it was in fact an infield fly and nobody made the call. That doesn't change the fact that it was an infield fly. It's still an infield fly.
Rule 829 says, when an infield fly is not initially called, the batter runner is declared out if brought to the umpire's attention before the next pitch.
Very good, Sherry. Thank you. So you have all the way up to the next pitch to still call that an infield fly, put everybody in their proper positions and not penalize anybody one way or the other, and then continue on with the next batter.
And if you call it an infield fly and it's not an infield fly.
That's correct. That just
It is what
you
it
made
is.
that call.
It is what it is.
Yeah, the play is what it is because you verbalized incorrectly doesn't change. It doesn't change what the play is. Much the same as if we had an out safe call at first base was the banger and we gave a safe call and yelled out. It doesn't change what it was. Whatever it was, we're going to refer back to that and we're going to do it correctly. And we have up until the next pitch to get it done. So that's correct, Mike. Thank you.
And there's a lengthy one that I just lost. Hold on just a second.
I have it. Is it the base?
Bases loaded, fly ball to first base, base runner runs down baseline, first baseman steps into base path. The ball moves into the field of play and base runner runs around her into the field of play. First baseman drops ball and runner runs home and scores. Do we have interference on the base runner? 1 out.
Again, without actually being there and seeing the play happen, The fact that the runner tried to avoid contact or interruption with the fielder is a plus for the runner, but that doesn't abstain them from being wrong in what occurred. They may still have interfered. If in your judgment, they interfered with the first baseman being able to make the initial play on the ball, then yes, you have interference. The runner is already out because they're the ones who hit the ball. They're automatically out for hitting an infield fly. I believe it's correct that you said it ended up being fair. So that makes the runner out. And because of the interference, we then have an out for the runner nearest home plate. So the runner who, I think you said the bases were loaded. So the runner at third would also be declared out for the interference. If in fact, in your judgment, you determine that to be interference. If you didn't determine that to be interference, runners can advance, runners can stay, runners can do whatever they want to do. They're just at liability to be put out. Does that answer that question fair enough? Or
Sounds like a what if question to me, but
it is very much so. It's a what if.
and I don't know if I've told the softball folks, but what if questions in officiating drive me crazy. And that was a great question actually, but it's always coming up and going and sitting in officials meetings. I sit there and watch these veterans argue about all these what if rules. Yeah. And for the longest time, it is just, I will never ask a what if question, but that was a good question. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah, the meeting could have ended 45 minutes ago, but they're still discussing what if meeting.
Yeah, I've been in those meetings before.
And James, did that answer your question? Okay.
Okay, good.
You said yes.
I saw the response. Do we have any other chat comments, Dana, that we need to verify?
I think we got them all. If I missed something in the chat, just if you could copy and paste it back in, that would be wonderful. I'm not gonna lie, I was not paying as close of attention. I was posting this meeting on social media, so.
No, that's okay.
So I do want to make a comment, and we just spent a good 45 minutes on Rule 230. Rule 230, one rule.
One rule.
And Gary and I had this discussion the other night, and I love it. I'm not a rule book individual. I don't referee my sport out of a rule book. I referee it or I officiate out of experience. But I will tell you that we have gotten so far from the fundamentals of what we do, and every rule deserves attention, just like we spent on Rule 230. And I think that if we can keep that in mind and we officiate our sports with a focus that, you know, we don't have to complicate the rule. We just need to find ways to simplify it. And Gary, I think I have an understanding. I had my small stint of softball, being a softball umpire, with Gary being a mentor and Mike being a mentor and our good friend Clark Evans. But you know, it truly, you know, fundamental. And I think that we need to, as NMOA officials, get back to basics in all sports and in all rules. And so I appreciate that Gary pretty much broke down one rule for an hour.
And I'll tell you what, when we've been on, I think I finally counted, Nate and I are now on like webinar number 153. It's been a lot of webinars, but when we do these deep dive rules webinars, it just makes me understand how good you all are at this, because I don't think people really fully understand the complexity of the rule book and the complexity of sport. They see it, they watch it, they think that because they're a fan, they really understand it. But when you get into these hour-long discussions about one very small part of a rule book, I'm always amazed. And, you know, this has been such a good experience spending all this time on these webinars, because the fact that you know this without looking at it is ridiculous. It's like, I'm just always amazed and impressed. And, you know, I say it all the time. I work for the best officials in the country, and these are just proof of that. So, wow. You know, Nate was talking about getting back to the basics and the fundamentals, but good grief, the basics and fundamentals are still pretty darn complicated. So my hat is off to all of you. Well done. Good job, Gary.
Well, thank you, Dana. And, you know, you referred back to my numerous 45 plus years of officiating, but one of the things that has really stuck in my mind the entire time is one of the very first meetings I ever went to. They were discussing the importance of the rule book, but most important, the definitions of what we were talking about. And that's something that I refer back to all the time. If we don't understand the definition of what we're talking about, how in the world can we get it right? You know, so that's something that I've always tried to refer to, and that's what I try to do tonight. And I hope that it helped anybody, one person.
Absolutely. And I just, you know, on a personal note, I want to thank you all, because Nate and I don't think Nate is going to mind me saying this, Nate and I have had a crappy week, for lack of a better word. And this has been awesome. I mean, we're both smiling, we're engaged. This has been exactly what our souls needed. So thank you all so much. I mean, I don't think people fully understand how great these are and how great our officials are. And it's just, we needed this. You know, Nate and I were both so grumpy today. We were like, so should I slap you, or should you slap me, or should we just slap each other and get it over with? So, you know, we're both smiling for probably the first time all week. And we really, you know, thank you. Just being around you all, even virtually, means the world. So, on a corny personal note, I just had to say that. And thank you for what you do, because you fill our hearts more than you know.
Well, we're lucky to have you guys. It is a group effort, and so we appreciate it. Appreciate what you do for us, and we at least can do the same for you guys.
Well, you know, we just have bright individuals. I mean, and I'm not sure if there's any newer softball officials or inexperienced softball officials in here, and if you are, I'm telling you, we have some of the best veterans and mentors in this state. I'm telling you, I mean, if it weren't for the wind, I probably would have stuck to softball because of Gary and Mike and Clark Evans and a few other people. I'll throw Tony Armijo out there. He's on this thing, you know, and Dino, and just people in that Southwest region that kind of helped me get it. And then it was windy and hot, and I couldn't stand it. So I was like, I'm going back to the 70-degree court weather.
But then you tell me you're willing to do baseball?
Well, I was, and then I backed out of that too. So
he likes climate-controlled sports. So.
Okay. And I understand that.
But I do appreciate everyone on this, because, man, I think we do have some of the greatest officials in the state. And Dana's right. Our week it's been rough, and it's only Wednesday, and we're.
Why'd you have to say that? It's only Wednesday. God.
But our night work on these things are 10 times better than everyday work at the office.
Hey, the only thing I want to just clarify is that the initial comments about this is we were also going to do tag up responsibilities, but they are actually pretty simple. And if you look at your umpire's manual, when there's a runner at third base, the home plate umpire has third base and the base umpire has the other two bases. And that's basically what the responsibilities are. So we didn't spend any time with that. It's not that we forgot it. We didn't forget it. It just felt like there was more time that was necessary to spend here. And I really appreciate the feedback that we got from you guys on the chats and stuff. It was great. Thanks. A lot of people that I've umpired with in the past that made comments. Thank you, Stan and Cherry, and you know, so it's great. It's always great to have the input from you guys. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
And John commented, Gary, as usual, simple and understandable.
I have a hard time being anything but simple. That's just my nature.
I say that at least once a week. I'm a simple woman, so I
Yeah.
get it. I try not
Yeah.
to be complicated.
That's right. Don't complicate things for me because I'm not going to understand.
Exactly. I need baseline stuff.
Yeah.
Does
So-
anybody have any other questions for Gary or for the good of the order?
Thank you, Ray.
Thank
And,
you. Gary. Good
Richard.
job.
Joseph wants to call some games down there with you, Gary. So make that happen, he says.
I can't say that.
We have a mutual ground right about PUC, so maybe we can.
Hey, Nate, can you check your personal messages?
Yeah, I just sent you. I thought I responded to you. I said, yep, just shoot me an email. I'll get it to you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I thought I hit send. I did not.
I do that all the time. Well, if there's no other questions, everybody, thank you so much for your attendance. Really good turnout tonight. I love when we have this many on a preseason, off season, whatever kind of season. I don't know what season spring's in anymore or softball's in anymore, but that's okay.
We're only a month away.
What's that?
We're only a month away.
I know, it's crazy, but it's almost going to be summer season, I think. So it's weird, but everybody, thank you so much. And if you've got any questions, feel free to shoot them our way. If it's something that Gary needs to answer, you can send it to me and we'll make sure he gets it. The season starts April 5th, I believe, is practice, and April 10th, I think, is the first day of games.
That's correct.
Thank you, because I have no idea which season starts when. So I was throwing one out and hoping that those were the right dates. Gary, thank you for confirming that. But again, thanks for everything tonight and for hanging on with us. We know that you all haven't been able to work in forever. So we actually, just a quick story, we got an email from a volleyball official today who said, in the subject line, it just said 478. And I was like, what? Was he just hitting keys or what? So I opened it and he had officiated a volleyball match last night between Las Cruces and Centennial. And I guess when the match had started, the Las Cruces head coach just said 478. And everybody just kind of looked at him and he goes, that's how many days since our last match, which was during the state semifinals last year at the volleyball championship. So, you know, I know everybody's kind of been waiting and it's just as exciting. I think people forget how exciting this is for our officials and umpires as well. So you guys are ready to get back on the diamond and do what it is that you do. And we appreciate your patience for all of this weirdness. We're looking forward to seeing y'all back doing what you love. And if you need anything from us as the season gets started and throughout the season, just feel free to holler. So thanks again. And we'll have a recording of this that we'll send to everybody and we'll get rocking and rolling and the train is on the track. So let's just keep it there.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Good. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. Have a good one, everybody.
All right.